Hi, and welcome to ITL's Big Day Out. My name is Stephanie Davies, and I'm the Head of Happiness for Laughology. And I'm here to give you 3 top tips of how humour can be used as a way to think differently, to learn differently, and a way to connect things differently. So my background is as a stand-up comedian, but I'm also a psychologist as well. So everything I know about the comedy world and everything I know about the mind and learning, I put together, and that's what you get in terms of Laughology. And so what I'm going to give you is 3 top tips to take away that might help you or might help the people that you teach as well. So the first one is all about how we feel, and I call this our humour triggers. These are things that we can think of that trigger a positive emotion. Now, all you need to do is sit down with your team or with a group of young people and to ask the question, what are all the things that make you laugh? Now, the important part is that you make it about a positive experience rather than a negative one. But the thing about our humour triggers is it brings a positive emotion to us. And that's why we call it a humour trigger, because by simply thinking about the thing that makes you laugh, it triggers a positive emotion. Now, let me give you the science behind that. So when we have a thought or a memory, it sits in the back part of our brain here. We call it the hippocampus, but I don't like big words. So I just simply call it the filing cabinet of experience. And when it sits in the filing cabinet of experience, it's not really doing anything, it's just dormant. But the minute we think about it or we talk about it in the current time, we pull it forward to the front part of our brain, and it's as if that experience is really happening. So it triggers a positive emotion. Now, you can do this on a Monday morning with your team, and you can ask for what's the best thing that's made you laugh the week before. So then they start the week on a positive. You can even create a humour triggers jar in your classroom. And so if young people, if children want to go and pull out something that's positive to help them feel better, they can read that. And so humour triggers are things that are positive, that make you laugh, and that you can recall on to help you feel better. And when we feel better, we think better. And when we laugh or even think about an experience that have made us laugh, it produces the positive neurotransmitters in our brain, which are, what do you think? They're dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And a really good way to remember that is a dose, D-O-S-E, of laughter produces happiness. And a dose of laughter is good for learning. So what are your humour triggers? Can you create a mini humour triggers jar in your classroom so people have something to pull out when they need it? Because just thinking about those things gets us in the right frame of mind to think differently, to learn differently, and to be positive as well. So that's the first top tip. The second top tip I'm going to give you is all about what I call magic questions. And magic questions help us to really think differently in the moment. They interrupt what I call our cognitive flow, and they take us on a different way of thinking. And a magic question needs to be really imaginative and really big. So it can be anything you like. And what it does is when you're stuck, it helps you become unstuck. And again, you can have a magic questions jar in your room or a magic questions board. So they're just there for people to use and children to use as inspiration. So to give you an example of this, so when I was younger, my mum used to use the best magic question on me because I'm dyslexic, and every other Friday we used to have a spelling test in my school, and I didn't know I was dyslexic. It wasn't identified until much later on in life. But I didn't know that that's the reason why I couldn't spell, and I just felt really stupid. So every other Friday, my mum used to just have absolute tantrums and tears from me. And I didn't want to go into school, and I'd do anything to get out of school. And so in the middle of my tantrums, my mum would ask me the best magic question. She'd say, Steph, what would Wonder Woman do? And I used to stop and I used to say, Mum, she put on a golden tiara and her golden pants and she'd go into school. And actually that interrupted me, and it made me take on a different persona. So a magic question might be, what would X do in terms of our superheroes? And get them to think about what their superheroes would do and put those answers up there. But a magic question can be as big as you like. So a magic question might even be, what would a 5-year-old do if you're talking to older children? Or even with your teams, what would a 5-year-old do? Because it doesn't necessarily need to be the right answers. It just needs to interrupt that thinking. Or it might be, how would a lion approach this situation? Or how would an octopus deal or think about this? It's just something that gets them to think really, really differently. And my favourite magic question is always, when people say, I don't know, I always trick them with, well, if you did know, what would be the answer? And sometimes they still continue to say, I don't know. So then I say, well, if you knew someone who had the answer, what would that be? Or if you knew someone who knew how to find out the answer, what would that be? So have a go at creating your own magic questions. Be really creative with it and get the children to even create their own, because they come up with the best magic questions. And the third and final activity or practical tip that I can give you today is all about what I call comedy connections. And comedy connections are brilliant because they help us to think about learning in a really different way. But they also have the mind to create different connections between characters and information. And because it's comedy, there's no wrong answer. But what we allow the brain to do is explore all the options around the question. And I'll give you an example of that. So a comedy connection might be, if King Henry VIII took one of his wives to a restaurant, which restaurant might they take them to and why? Or it might be, if King Henry VIII went to McDonald's, what would he order and why? And what they're doing there is they're thinking about why he would order those things in terms of his character traits and things that they might need to discuss. Another one might be about two people going on a date, or it might be a character, who would they take on a date and why? And you can even do this with maths. So it might be, who or what would a square take on a date, or which other shape would a square take on a date and why? And that way they get to explore all those facets of that shape. And my favourite one with older children and older young people is about writing a dating profile. So what would X's dating profile be? And they need to write a description that would go on a dating profile. But comedy connections is about mixing ideas. It's about putting two things together that wouldn't normally go together. And you can be as big and expansive with it as you like. And what that does, it means there's no wrong answer. So people can explore things in a different way. It means the brain makes connections in a really safe way, and it means we have fun with it. And when we have fun, it produces the positive neurotransmitters. Can you remember what they were? DOSE, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And when they're produced, it creates what we call sticky learning, which means we've had a positive emotional experience to that learning, and that's more likely to stick in the brain because we associate it with a positive memory. Enjoy your day, and hope you have a go at trying those 3 things.